Why the Book of Enoch was removed from the Bible. What nobody tells you about the world we're living in right now is that we are witnessing the same level of corruption that brought God's judgment in Noah's time. But here's what's even more troubling. Deep down, we know this. We know that children are being taught to question the very gender God gave them, yet we call it progress. We know that scientists are editing the genetic code of human babies, yet we call it medicine. We know that we've created artificial minds that know us better than we know ourselves, yet we call it innovation. We know the boundaries God established at creation are being systematically erased. We know we're worshipping our own creations instead of the Creator. We know, but we close our eyes. But what we don't know might terrify us even more. Ancient texts reveal that the giants who once terrorized the earth didn't simply disappear with Noah's flood. Listen to what was preserved in the Book of Enoch. Gabriel the archangel was sent to incite the giants to commit civil war against themselves and their offspring. They all began to kill each other. The watchers beheld the destruction of their families. Noah goes into the ark, and the flood comes and begins to kill all life, but not all the giants are killed by the flood. Yahweh sends Leviathan to kill all the giants who survived. And here's what should make every believer pause. The giants and their sons still remaining on the earth without bodies become evil spirits. They're still here. The corruption didn't end with the flood. It evolved. The technologies we celebrate, the boundaries we're erasing, the very knowledge we're pursuing. Ancient texts reveal this isn't progress, it's repetition. And Ethiopian wisdom, preserved for thousands of years, shows us exactly what we're facing. You see, there's a book that most churches removed from their Bibles, but the Ethiopian Orthodox Church kept it, the Book of Enoch. The New Testament itself quotes directly from this book. Jude, the brother of Jesus, didn't just reference Enoch. He quoted him word for word. Behold, the Lord comes with 10,000s of his holy ones to execute judgment on all. This exact prophecy appears in the Book of Enoch, chapter 1, verse 9. This is quoted word for word in Jude 1:14-15. Think about that. A New Testament author, the brother of Christ himself, considered Enoch's words important enough to preserve in Scripture. So, why did most churches remove it? In the 4th and 5th centuries, church councils decided that Enoch's detailed accounts of fallen angels and their forbidden knowledge were too controversial, too specific about the spiritual realm that most preferred to keep mysterious. They worried that these vivid descriptions of angelic rebellion and genetic corruption might confuse believers or lead them into speculation rather than simple faith. But the Ethiopian Orthodox Church saw something different. They recognized that Enoch's warnings weren't distractions from the gospel, they were preparation for it. They understood that in the last days, believers would need to recognize the same patterns of deception that destroyed Noah's generation. These are not just mythologies. These are direct warnings from the oldest apocalyptic witness the church ever saw fit to exclude, except the Ethiopians, who preserved it for this very moment. And they were right. And in its pages lies a warning so urgent, so relevant to our time, that it will change how you see everything happening around us. Enoch saw the watchers. According to ancient texts preserved for over 2 millennia, 200 beings of terrible beauty descended from heaven like falling stars, each with specific names that scribes carefully recorded in trembling hands. Enoch 7-8 gives names: Azazel, Shemihazah, Kokabel. Each taught a piece of forbidden knowledge: warfare, witchcraft, seduction, astrology. Shemhazai, whose very presence warped the minds of men toward enchantment. Azazel, who forged weapons that could split mountains and spill oceans of blood. Amazarak, who tore open the veil between earth and the cosmic forces beyond. Today, we call it progress. Enoch called it corruption. These weren't mythical beings in the minds of ancient storytellers. These were documented entities whose influence shattered the very foundations of human civilization. These weren't just ancient myths. These were real beings who crossed a line that should never have been crossed, unleashing chaos across the face of the earth. They looked upon human women and found them beautiful. They descended from heaven's glory and took wives from among the daughters of men, corrupting the very DNA of creation itself. And from these unholy unions came the Nephilim, giants whose footsteps shook mountains, whose breath was violence, whose very existence was an abomination that made the earth cry out in agony. The first genetic manipulation in history, and it nearly destroyed everything. But it wasn't just their offspring that corrupted the earth, it was their knowledge. Azazel taught the making of swords and shields, breastplates and mirrors. He showed women how to paint their faces with antimony and beautify themselves with ornaments. Shemhazai revealed enchantments and root cutting. Armaros taught the resolving of enchantments. Barakel taught astrology. Kokabel taught the signs of the stars. Ezekiel taught the knowledge of clouds. Arakiel taught the signs of the earth. Shamsiel taught the signs of the sun. Sariel taught the course of the moon. Does this sound familiar? Today we call it technology. Artificial intelligence that predicts our future like ancient astrology. Weapons of mass destruction that make Azazel's swords look like toys. Genetic engineering that creates new forms of life, crossing boundaries that God established at creation. Social media algorithms that enchant our minds more powerfully than any ancient magic. Cosmetic surgery that transforms faces beyond recognition. We've taken the forbidden knowledge and made it our religion. Let that sink in for a moment. What Enoch witnessed was the systematic annihilation of human civilization. The Watchers didn't just teach random skills. They taught humanity to storm the gates of heaven, to seize the knowledge of gods, to manipulate the building blocks of life itself, to become something monstrous, something that was never meant to exist. In chapter 10:8, God declares, "The whole earth has been corrupted through the works that were taught by Azazel, and the result? The earth was drowning in violence. All flesh had corrupted its way before God. Every imagination of human hearts was only evil continually. The very fabric of creation was being torn apart at the seams." Sound familiar? When Enoch was taken up into heaven, he witnessed the throne room where the Almighty looked down upon the earth and saw that the boundaries he had established were being systematically obliterated. Gender boundaries, species boundaries, the boundary between heaven and earth, the boundary between creator and created. Every sacred line that God had drawn to protect his creation was being erased by beings drunk on forbidden power. And so came the judgment. Waters that rose like mountains, skies that opened like scrolls, a flood that didn't just cleanse, it obliterated a world that had become unrecognizable, washing away every trace of the abomination that humanity had become. But here's what should terrify us and humble us at the same time. We're there again. We've reached the same level of boundary destruction that summoned the wrath of heaven itself. We've reached the same level of boundary destruction that brought the flood. We're genetically modifying crops, animals, and now humans themselves. We're creating artificial intelligence that we worship as omniscient. We're declaring that gender is fluid, that life and death are ours to control, that we can improve on God's design. The Nephilim walked the earth as giants, their every step leaving craters of terror, their voices shaking the foundations of human dignity. Today, historical parallels suggest our corporations and institutions have become modern giants that tower over individual souls, crushing anyone who dares oppose their redefinition of reality. According to the patterns preserved in ancient wisdom, we've created what ancient texts would recognize as modern Nephilim, hybrid entities, neither fully human in their values nor divine in their authority, yet they claim dominion over the very essence of what it means to be human. But Enoch's vision didn't end with judgment. It blazed with something beautiful and terrible. In the midst of all this cosmic chaos, God still had his people. Enoch walked with God while giants roamed the earth. Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord while the world dissolved into madness. There were those who refused to bow before the altars of corruption, who maintained their connection to heaven while living on an earth that had declared war against its creator. That's us. That's who we're called to be in this generation. Like Enoch, we've been given eyes to see what's really happening. The enchantments of our age, the addictive technologies, the worship of human achievement, the celebration of boundary breaking. They don't have to capture us. We can discern the spirits behind them. We can see through the illusion. Ethiopian wisdom preserved this knowledge because it knew this day would come again, when the ancient patterns would repeat, when humanity would once again reach for forbidden knowledge and call it enlightenment, when the boundaries would be erased and called progress, when the giants would walk among us again, this time wearing suits and controlling algorithms. But here's the hope that fills my heart when I read Enoch's prophecy. The same God who preserved Noah through the flood has preserved us for such a time as this. He didn't place us in this generation by accident. He placed us here because he knew we would need the wisdom of Enoch, the discernment to see through the deception, the courage to stand against the current, the faith to walk with God when everyone else is walking with the watchers. This isn't about fear. This is about clarity. When you understand what's really happening, you're no longer confused by the chaos around you. You're no longer overwhelmed by the pace of change. You see it for what it is. The same ancient rebellion in modern clothes. The same forbidden knowledge being offered as salvation. The same boundaries being erased in the name of liberation. And you have a choice. You can participate in the corruption, or you can walk with God like Enoch did. You can chase after the forbidden knowledge, or you can seek the wisdom that comes from above. You can try to become like gods, or you can remain beautifully, powerfully human as God designed you to be. The Watchers taught humanity that we could transcend our limitations through knowledge and technology. But Enoch learned something different. He learned that we transcend our limitations through relationship with the one who created us, not by breaking the boundaries, but by finding our freedom within them, not by becoming gods, but by becoming the children of God we were always meant to be. This is the message our generation needs to hear. In a world drunk on its own power, we need the sobriety of ancient wisdom. In a time when everyone is trying to be superhuman, we need the courage to be fully human. In an age of artificial intelligence, we need the intelligence that comes from walking with the Ancient of Days. The Book of Enoch ends with a vision of judgment, yes, but also with a vision of restoration. A new heaven and a new earth where the righteous dwell in peace, where the boundaries are restored, where humanity remembers its place in the cosmic order and finds joy in that place rather than rebellion against it. That restoration begins with us, with people who hear the warning and heed it, who see the pattern and refuse to repeat it, who choose the narrow path of walking with God over the broad way that leads to destruction. The same God who walked with Enoch in the garden of corruption is waiting to walk with you in the midst of ours. He sees what you see. He grieves what you grieve. He knows the pressure you feel to conform to this world's madness. But he's preserved ancient wisdom for such a time as this, not to make you afraid, but to make you free. Free from the enchantments of our age, free from the worship of human achievement, free to be what you were always meant to be, a child of the Most High, walking in covenant relationship with the Creator of all boundaries and the Restorer of all that is broken. The Watchers promised humanity the knowledge of gods, but they delivered the destruction of everything good and holy. God promises us something different, not the knowledge of gods, but the knowledge of God, not the power to transcend our humanity, but the grace to fulfill it, not the ability to break every boundary, but the wisdom to flourish within the boundaries of His love. That's the choice before us. That's the warning and the hope preserved in Ethiopian wisdom. That's the message hidden in ancient texts and revealed for such a time as this. Take a moment, in silence. Ask yourself, not what the world expects of you, but what God has preserved in you for such a time as this. The voice that whispers when everyone else is shouting, the conviction that remains when everything else is shifting, the knowledge of what is true when everything else calls truth relative. Choose wisely. Choose life. Choose to walk with God while the world walks toward judgment. The angels are still watching, and so is He. In this very moment, He is waiting for your response to His ancient warning and His eternal love. If this ancient warning has stirred something in your heart, if you sense the urgency of these times, let others know by sharing this message. Subscribe to join others who refuse to close their eyes to these times. Together, we're preserving the wisdom that was almost lost, the knowledge our generation desperately needs. The wisdom of Enoch was preserved for such a time as this, and for people like you who have eyes to see.